The haunting melody of a fiddle cut through the night air as Henrietta Greene pressed her back against the cold exterior wall of the Silverton dance hall, her heart pounding against her corset like a wild mustang. It was 1875 in the Colorado Territory, and she had fled the crowded, smoky room inside where men's hungry eyes followed her every move, their whiskey-laden breaths calling her name. Henrietta hadn't come west to be gawked at, she'd come to escape, to rebuild, to become someone new entirely. She clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, the cool September air carrying the scent of pine and tobacco. The dim lantern light from inside the hall barely reached where she stood, casting long shadows across the dirt road. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes as she considered her limited options in this mining town. "Miss? Are you all right out here?" The deep voice startled her. A tall figure emerged from around the corner of the building, his silhouette unmistakably that of a cowboy, broad-shouldered with a hat that cast shadows across his features. Henrietta instinctively stepped backward. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, her voice betraying her nerves. He stepped closer, and the spill of light from a nearby window revealed his face, rugged but kind, with eyes that seemed to understand more than she wanted anyone to know. "You don't look fine," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "Most ladies don't hide outside during a town dance unless something's troubling them." Henrietta looked away. "Perhaps I'm not like most ladies." The man smiled, and something about it made the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. He removed his hat and held it against his chest, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Daniel Quincy," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "Ranch foreman at the Double Creek, madam." "Henrietta Greene," she replied cautiously. Daniel nodded toward the dance hall, where the music had shifted to something slower, more inviting. "Would it be terribly forward of me to ask why you're hiding from the dance hall lights when there's good music and company inside?" Henrietta hesitated, studying his face. There was something disarming about him, something that didn't set off the warnings that most men did these days. "I don't enjoy being the center of attention," she admitted. "Being new in town comes with expectations." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "The men inside can be a rowdy bunch after a few drinks. Especially when a beautiful woman walks in." Henrietta felt her cheeks warm despite the cool evening air. She hadn't been called beautiful in a long while, at least not in a way that didn't make her skin crawl. Daniel extended his hand, palm up, his expression gentle. "Dance with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Right here, where there's no crowd. Just the music." The fiddle's melody drifted through the night air, surprisingly clear even outside the hall. Henrietta stared at his outstretched hand, memories of another time, another place flooding back of dancing in Philadelphia ballrooms before scandal and tragedy had sent her fleeing west. "I couldn't possibly, nobody watching," Daniel assured her. "Just the stars and maybe a few curious coyotes in the distance." A small laugh escaped her lips, surprising even herself. "You're very persistent, Mr. Quincy." "Only when something feels important," he replied, his hand still extended. With a deep breath, Henrietta placed her gloved hand in his. Daniel smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, and gently pulled her into a proper dance frame, still maintaining a respectful distance. They began to sway to the distant music, dancing in the shadows cast by the lantern light. For the first time since arriving in Silverton 2 weeks ago, Henrietta felt herself truly relax. "You dance beautifully," Daniel commented. "Something tells me you've done this before." "In another life," she answered cryptically. "We all have those," he replied, not pressing further. "That's what the West is for new beginnings." As they moved together, Henrietta studied him more closely. His clothes were worn but well kept, his hands calloused from hard work. Unlike the miners and gamblers inside, there was something steady about Daniel Quincy, something trustworthy. "How long have you been in Silverton?" she asked, finding herself curious about him. 5 years now. Came out after the war with not much more than my horse and the clothes on my back." "The war changed everything for many people," she observed quietly. Daniel nodded, his expression momentarily distant. Lost my brother at Gettysburg. After that, staying in Virginia didn't feel right anymore. I'm sorry, Henrietta said softly. Life goes on, he replied. Found my way here, started working cattle, and discovered I had a knack for it. Mr. Reynolds, he owns Double Creek, made me foreman last year. His eyes found hers again. And what brings a lady like you to our little mining town? The question was innocent enough, but Henrietta tensed slightly. Daniel immediately noticed. Forgive me, he said. That's your business, not mine. No, it's all right, she found herself saying, though she rarely discussed her past. I came for the teaching position. The town council hired me to start the school next month. Daniel's face brightened. So you're the new schoolteacher? The whole town's been talking about it. The families with children have been waiting for a proper school for years. Henrietta couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. I hope I don't disappoint them. Something tells me you won't, he replied with conviction. The music from inside changed to something more upbeat, breaking the spell of their quiet dance. They stopped moving, but Daniel didn't immediately release her hand. Thank you for the dance, Miss Greene, he said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze before letting go. Thank you for finding me in the shadows, Mr. Quincy, she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. He placed his hat back on his head and tipped it slightly. Perhaps you might consider coming inside? I promise to keep the rowdier elements at bay. Henrietta hesitated, then shook her head. Not tonight, I think. But I appreciate the offer. Daniel nodded, respecting her decision. Then may I walk you home? These streets can be unpredictable after dark. The boarding house where she was staying was only 3 blocks away, but the offer was tempting. Not just for safety, but for the company. That would be kind of you. She accepted. As they walked through the quiet streets of Silverton, the sounds of the dance hall fading behind them, Henrietta felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of possibility, of hope. Daniel Quincy seemed different from the men she'd been running from, and for the first time since arriving in Colorado, she wondered if perhaps she'd found not just a hiding place, but somewhere she might actually belong. What Henrietta didn't know was that this quiet walk through Silverton's moonlit streets was just the beginning of a story either of them could have anticipated, one that would test them both in ways they couldn't imagine. The following morning, Henrietta woke to the sounds of Silverton coming alive, the distant clang of mining equipment, the calls of merchants setting up their stalls in the town square, the clip-clop of horses on the main street. She dressed carefully in one of her modest day dresses, a deep blue that complemented her auburn hair, which she pinned up neatly as befitted a schoolteacher. Mrs. Pemberton, the stern widow who ran the boarding house, eyed her appraisingly as Henrietta came down for breakfast. You returned rather early from the social last night, Miss Greene. Yes, it was overwhelming, Henrietta replied carefully, accepting a cup of coffee. The older woman murmured. A young woman should be careful about her reputation in a town like this. Being seen leaving alone with a man could start talk. Henrietta nearly choked on her coffee. I assure you, Mrs. Pemberton, Mr. Quincy was a perfect gentleman. He merely escorted me home safely. Daniel Quincy? Mrs. Pemberton's eyebrows rose. Well, that's different then. He's one of the few decent men in this county. Her expression softened slightly. Still, a schoolteacher must be above reproach. I understand, Henrietta said, though inwardly she bristled at the scrutiny. She'd hoped to escape such watchfulness in the West. After breakfast, Henrietta made her way to the small building that would serve as the schoolhouse. The town council had converted an old storefront, and she had 2 weeks to prepare it before students arrived. As she unlocked the door, she was surprised to hear the sound of horses approaching. Daniel Quincy dismounted from a sturdy chestnut gelding, leading a wagon driven by an older man with a weathered face and white beard. Good morning, Miss Greene, Daniel called, removing his hat. Hope we're not intruding. Mr. Quincy, she acknowledged, genuinely pleased to see him. This is unexpected. This is Mr. Reynolds, my employer. Daniel introduced the older man, who tipped his hat politely. When I mentioned meeting our new schoolteacher, he insisted on coming to town to offer some assistance. Mr. Reynolds climbed down from the wagon with surprising agility for his age. Miss Greene, welcome to Silverton. My ranch has more lumber than we need for the season, and I thought perhaps your schoolhouse might benefit from some proper bookshelves and a teacher's desk. Henrietta was momentarily speechless. That's incredibly generous, Mr. Reynolds. Education matters out here, young lady, the rancher said gruffly. Had 5 children of my own, though they're all grown and gone now. Would have given anything for a proper teacher when they were young. Daniel was already unloading planks of wood from the wagon. I thought we might build them today, if that suits you, Miss Greene. Today? She echoed, looking between the two men. No time like the present, Mr. Reynolds declared. Daniel here is nearly as good with woodworking as he is with cattle. His father was a carpenter back east. Daniel looked slightly embarrassed at the praise. It's just basic craftsmanship, but it'll be sturdier than anything you could order from the mercantile. The unexpected kindness brought tears to Henrietta's eyes, which she quickly blinked away. I don't know what to say except thank you. No need for thanks, Mr. Reynolds waved dismissively. Community takes care of its own out here. The idea of being considered one of their own warmed something inside Henrietta that had been cold for too long. Throughout the day, Daniel measured and cut wood, while Mr. Reynolds told stories of the early days of Silverton. Henrietta organized her teaching materials and swept years of dust from corners. By mid-afternoon, the schoolroom was transformed with 2 beautiful bookshelves and a solid oak teacher's desk that Daniel had crafted with remarkable skill. This is magnificent. Henrietta ran her hand along the smooth surface of the desk. I never expected such a welcome. The children deserve a proper school, Daniel said, wiping sawdust from his hands. And a teacher deserves the tools to teach them. Mr. Reynolds had stepped outside to speak with a passing friend, leaving them momentarily alone. I must admit, Mr. Quincy, Henrietta said quietly, I'm not accustomed to such kindness without expectations. Daniel looked at her steadily. Out here, we judge people by their actions, not their past. Whatever brought you to Silverton doesn't matter as much as what you do now that you're here. The perceptiveness of his comments startled her. You seem to understand a great deal without being told. I recognize someone running from something, he said simply. Seen that look in enough eyes, including my own reflection years ago. Henrietta hesitated, then asked, Does it ever stop? The running? When you find something worth staying for, he answered, his gaze holding hers for a moment longer than was proper. The door swung open as Mr. Reynolds returned. Nearly supper time. Miss Greene, would you do us the honor of joining us at the hotel restaurant? My treat, to welcome our new schoolteacher properly. Henrietta glanced at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging nod. I would be delighted, Mr. Reynolds. The 3 dined together at Silverton's finest establishment, where Mr. Reynolds was clearly respected. Several townspeople stopped by their table to introduce themselves to Henrietta, all expressing excitement about the school. For the first time since arriving, she felt truly welcomed. As they ate, Mr. Reynolds regaled them with tales of the early days of his ranch. When I first came here in '58, there wasn't much more than a trading post and a few prospectors. Bought 500 acres for a song, and everyone thought I was mad. Gold's in the mountains, they said, not in raising beef. But people always need to eat, gold or no gold. It's a beautiful property, Daniel added. Some of the finest grazing land in Colorado. And too much for an old man to manage alone, Reynolds said pointedly. Been trying to convince this young man to become a partner for 2 years now. Daniel looked down at his plate. Still saving up, sir. Want to make sure I bring my fair share to any partnership. Stubbornness runs in the Quincy blood, Miss Greene, the older man told Henrietta with a wink. But loyalty does too, which is why I keep trying. As the evening progressed, Henrietta found herself relaxing in their company. Daniel was attentive without being overbearing, and Mr. Reynolds treated her with a fatherly respect that reminded her of her own father before scandal had torn her family apart. When dinner ended, Daniel insisted on walking her back to the boarding house. "You've done enough for me today," Henrietta protested mildly. "My mother would haunt me from the grave if I let a lady walk alone after dark," he replied with a smile that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. They walked slowly through the town, which was quieter on a Tuesday night than it had been during the weekend dance. Stars blanketed the sky above them, brighter than Henrietta had ever seen back east. "Thank you," she said after they had walked in comfortable silence for a while. "For the desk, the bookshelves. For making me feel welcome." "You're easy to welcome," Daniel replied. "The children are going to be lucky to have you." As they reached the boarding house steps, Henrietta turned to face him. "Mr. Quincy, please," he interrupted gently. "When we're not in formal company, I'd be honored if you'd call me Daniel." She smiled. "Daniel, then. And I'm Henrietta." "Henrietta," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt on his lips. "It suits you strong and elegant at once." The compliment brought color to her cheeks. Will I see you again before school starts? I'm heading back to the ranch tomorrow, but I'll be in town on Saturday for supplies. Perhaps I could call on you then? Maybe show you some of the countryside if the weather holds?" The prospect of spending more time with him was more appealing than Henrietta wanted to admit. "I'd like that very much." "Until Saturday, then," he said, taking her hand and pressing it briefly before releasing it. "Good night, Henrietta." "Good night, Daniel." She watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. For the first time in months, Henrietta found herself looking forward to what the coming days might bring. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Henrietta threw herself into preparing the schoolhouse, creating lesson plans for students ranging from 6 to 16 years old, and slowly getting to know the townspeople. True to his word, Daniel returned on Saturday, taking her on a horseback ride to a scenic overlook where they could see the entire valley. "It's breathtaking," Henrietta gasped, taking in the panorama of mountains, forests, and the silver ribbon of river cutting through the landscape. "First time I saw this view, I knew I'd found home," Daniel said, standing beside her at the edge of the bluff. They spent hours talking that day, sharing pieces of themselves. Daniel told her about growing up in Virginia, about losing his father young and having to support his mother and brother, about the war that had torn his world apart. Henrietta shared safer parts of her own story: her love of teaching, her childhood in Philadelphia, her passion for literature. She omitted the scandal that had sent her fleeing westward, the whispers and accusations that had followed her father's financial ruin and subsequent suicide. On the ride back to town, Daniel's horse spooked at a rattlesnake crossing their path. He controlled the animal expertly, but not before Henrietta glimpsed a flash of fear in his eyes that seemed disproportionate to the minor incident. "Are you all right?" she asked when they had moved past the danger. "Fine," he answered too quickly, then sighed. "Sorry. Some things from the war. They stay with you." Henrietta nodded, understanding more than he realized. "We all have ghosts, Daniel." He glanced at her with newfound appreciation. "Most people tell me to simply get over it. Wounds of the spirit heal no faster than wounds of the flesh," she replied. "Sometimes slower." When they returned to town, Daniel surprised her by asking, "Would you allow me to write to you when I'm at the ranch?" The request was formal, old-fashioned, a gentleman courting a lady properly. It touched Henrietta deeply. "I would like that very much." The day the school opened, Henrietta stood nervously before 28 children of various ages, their parents watching from the back of the room. To her surprise, Daniel appeared just as she was about to begin, slipping quietly into the back row. His encouraging nod gave her the confidence she needed. "Welcome to the first day of Silverton School," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My name is Miss Greene, and I believe that education is the greatest gift we can give to the future." The school day was chaotic but rewarding. When the children filed out at 3 o'clock, Daniel remained behind, helping her straighten the room. "You were magnificent," he told her. "Those children were hanging on your every word." "It feels right," she admitted. "Teaching has always been my sanctuary." "I brought you something," Daniel said, reaching into his saddlebag. He pulled out a small wooden box, intricately carved with flowers and vines. "Made it during evenings at the ranch." Henrietta opened it to find a beautiful fountain pen inside. "Daniel, this is too much. Every teacher needs a proper writing instrument," he insisted. "And I thought, maybe you could use it for our letters too." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that what was growing between them was becoming important to them both. Daniel began riding into town twice a week instead of just on Saturdays. They established a routine: walks after school, Sunday picnics when weather permitted, quiet conversations on the boarding house porch under Mrs. Pemberton's watchful but increasingly approving eye. Their letters, exchanged when Daniel was at the ranch, grew more personal, more revealing. As autumn progressed, rumors began circulating about Henrietta's past. It started with whispers: a traveling businessman who claimed to recognize her name from a Philadelphia scandal, questions about why a well-educated woman would choose a remote mining town. One evening in early November, Daniel found Henrietta on the schoolhouse steps after hours, tears streaming down her face, a crumpled newspaper in her hands. "Henrietta? What's happened?" he asked, immediately sitting beside her. Wordlessly, she handed him the Philadelphia newspaper someone had left on her desk. It detailed the Greene family scandal, her father's investment scheme that had cost dozens of families their savings, his suicide when faced with arrest, the subsequent ostracism of his wife and daughter despite their innocence. Daniel read it silently, then folded it carefully. "Is this why you came west?" She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I should have told you. I'm sorry." "For what?" he asked gently. "Being the daughter of a man who made terrible choices. For surviving something that would have broken most people." Henrietta finally looked at him, searching his face for judgment, and finding none. "People will talk. The school board might ask for my resignation." "Let them try," Daniel said with unexpected fierceness. "You've done nothing wrong, and anyone who says otherwise will answer to me." His loyalty overwhelmed her. "Why are you so good to me?" Daniel took her hands in his. "Because I've fallen in love with you, Henrietta Greene. Your past doesn't change that. If anything, knowing what you've overcome only makes me admire you more." The declaration stunned her. "Daniel!" "You don't have to say anything now," he assured her. "I know it's sudden." "No," she interrupted, squeezing his hands. "It's not sudden at all. It's been building since you found me hiding from the dance hall lights and asked me to dance." His eyes lit with hope. "Henrietta, I love you too," she whispered. "But loving me comes with complications. This scandal might be just the beginning." Daniel gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'm not afraid of complications." True to his word, Daniel stood by her side as the whispers grew. When 3 families threatened to withdraw their children from school, he personally visited each home, speaking on Henrietta's behalf. Mr. Reynolds used his considerable influence with the town council to ensure her position remained secure. By Christmas, the controversy had largely subsided. The children's obvious advancement in their studies spoke louder than old gossip, and Henrietta's dedication to the town had won over most skeptics. On Christmas Eve, Daniel invited Henrietta to the Double Creek Ranch for dinner with Mr. Reynolds. The ranch house was decorated with pine boughs and candles, a large tree standing in the corner of the sitting room. "It's beautiful," Henrietta said, taking in the warmth of the home Daniel had described in so many letters. After dinner, Mr. Reynolds conspicuously excused himself to check on the horses, leaving them alone by the fireplace. Daniel seemed uncharacteristically nervous, pacing before finally sitting beside her. "Henrietta, there's something I need to tell you." Her heart sank, old fears resurfacing. "What is it?" "Mr. Reynolds has made me a full partner in the ranch," he said. "Papers were signed yesterday." Relief flooded through her. Daniel, that's wonderful news. There's more. He continued. Part of our agreement is that I'll build my own house on the eastern property. It's the most beautiful spot on the ranch, overlooks the valley, catches the first morning light. He took her hands in his. What I'm trying to say rather poorly is that I want to build that house for us. If you'll have me. Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring with a modest diamond. Henrietta Greene, I love you with everything I am. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Daniel. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a tender kiss there first, but one that promised a lifetime of love to follow. They were married in the spring of 1876, with the entire town in attendance. Mr. Reynolds gave the bride away, and Henrietta's students sang a song they had secretly practiced for the occasion. As Daniel had promised, they moved into a beautiful house he had built on the eastern ridge of Double Creek Ranch. Henrietta continued teaching, riding to town each day on a mare Daniel had trained especially for her. On weekends they explored the countryside together, discovering hidden valleys and peaceful streams that became their special places. When their first child was born a year later, a daughter they named Elizabeth after Daniel's mother, the school board insisted on building a small classroom addition to the church that was much closer to the ranch, allowing Henrietta to teach while remaining near her family. Over the years, as their family grew to include 2 sons and another daughter, Daniel and Henrietta weathered the challenges of ranch life together: harsh winters, cattle diseases, economic downturns. Through it all, their love remained constant, a beacon that guided them through even the darkest times. On their 20th anniversary, Daniel surprised Henrietta by bringing her back to the spot outside the Silverton dance hall where they had first danced. The town's changed so much, she remarked, looking at the now prosperous mining community that had expanded significantly over the years. Some things never change, though, Daniel said, taking her in his arms just as he had that night long ago. Dance with me? And there, under the stars, with gray beginning to streak their hair and the lines of life's experiences etched on their faces, they danced, no longer hiding from anything, but celebrating all they had built together from that first moment when a cowboy found a frightened young woman in the shadows and offered her not just a dance, but a future. Their love story became something of a legend in Silverton, the schoolteacher with a past, and the cowboy who saw beyond it to the woman she truly was. And when their grandchildren asked how they met, Daniel would always begin the tale the same way. It was 1875, and the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen was hiding from the dance hall lights. I found her in the shadows, and all I could think to say was, "Dance with me."